Hello, everyone. We are here with the Wellness Warriors Collective. I'm Dr. Melissa Leedy, clinical health psychologist.
And I'm board certified health coach, Tiffany Turner-Coats.
Yes. So we are here today with another episode, and we're going to talk about gut health. Tiffany's going to mainly do all the talking because this is like her passion, her area that she loves to research and study and talk to people about. And she's got her own personal experiences that she might want to share. And I know like this much. So
I think you know a little bit more than that.
I don't know. Maybe just enough to be dangerous.
Anyway. There's, so much information around gut health right now. I feel like it's been a pretty trending topic for the last year or two, but I mean, like, what is gut health? Like, I mean, I think there's still a lot of, maybe it's like an ambiguous topic for a lot of people, don't you think?
Well, yeah, I think there's a ton of information from a lot of different people, and you don't really know what's what, and it gets confusing because you don't even know what's going on in your gut.
Right.
Or to know if any of the symptoms that you're having or the problems that you're having, if those are related to your gut.
Right.
It feels like a really complex scientific medical thing with words I don't know how to pronounce.
Oh, right. I mean, it is definitely complex. Like, I feel like we're just like touching like the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
With the information that, people are learning about how it affects, I mean, obviously your digestive tract, but I mean, 90 to 95% of your serotonin comes from...
Well, yes,
right?
I do know that.
Like, that's a pretty staggering number.
Right. So when she's saying that, basically she's saying that it's protein, actually, right? Mm-hmm. Protein in the gut, the protein that we eat is one of the essential building blocks for your gut to go up to your brain to produce serotonin, which is, one of the main mental health neurotransmitters. And so if we're not eating well, or if our gut is not absorbing those nutrients, literally our brain doesn't have the building blocks to make what we need for better mental health.
Right, for healthy brain functionality, as a whole.
So how would you, like when you think about gut health, or if you're talking to somebody who has no idea what gut health is, like how would you define it? How would you describe it?
Okay, so I like to, when you say gut health, I mean, it's obviously the health of your digestive system, essentially. And there's trillions of bacteria, and it can easily get imbalanced.
Good bacteria, good and bad bacteria.
Right.
But we need the good bacteria.
Yeah,
sure.
We want the good bacteria. But it also helps, you synthesize vitamins. Or vitamins.
Viams. Yeah. Don't look up Viams because that's not a real word.
Yeah, it's pretty new. I don't know if everyone's learned about it yet, but
I'm keeping this in.
Yeah, it has to go in. But I mean, it is very complex, and I think it takes for everyone. It looks different. It's kind of experimenting to find what works best for you. Is it, like I said, prebiotic, probiotic? Are you having yogurt? Are you eating fermented foods? Maintaining that healthy balance is, I mean, everything.
Right. But I do think, like, what I know is that when you're probably having some kind of gut imbalance or gut health problem, like you're going to have things like bloating and, weird bowel movements, like either lack of like constipation. Or diarrhea or
irritable bowels
or like leaky gut, things like that, inflammation. I think when you have gut imbalances, like you have these symptoms, but I think we just take them for granted. We're like, doesn't everybody have problems pooping?
Right. Or, bloating.
I mean, hello, like, doesn't everybody have it?
Right. Like, it's something that happens, monthly. Right. I mean, it just seems to be really common. And I also think, like you said, inflammation is huge because there is a correlation between inflammation and so many chronic illnesses. And your gut health is, I think that there's a direct relation. But I mean, it really and truly is. And I think where we are, how our medical system is currently, let's say you're sick, you have something going on, and we are pretty quick as a society to prescribe, not everyone of course, but just here is a pill, here's an antibiotic. Well, I mean, what happens?
Or I don't know what's going on with you, so just try to keep doing what you're doing.
Right. It's
or it's not that big of a deal.
Right. Oh, yeah. It should be manageable. Right. I mean, it could be, you're being prescribed an antibiotic, or you're being prescribed something else that we were previously talking about. And it's essentially just putting a Band-Aid on, an underlying issue.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are unaware of, the repercussions of throwing off your bacterial system. I mean, I have a personal experience with that. I had to take antibiotics for a while. I had like a tooth issue or something, and ended up having a multitude of other issues that happened. But in hindsight, I just wasn't healing. My body was not getting better. I mean, I was like 2 to 3 years in. I ended up being diagnosed with this crazy obscure disease, very, very, very rare, that I was going to have for the rest of my life. And really, I had just thrown off my bacterial system from taking antibiotics because of a tooth issue.
Right. And this was something you actually found out. Like, you actually got diagnosed with a gut imbalance.
Yes.
To say this is the cause of it. Right. So had you not even known that this is a possibility of a contributing factor,
I would have
never would have known, and then you never would have treated yourself the way you did.
Yes.
Which you treated how?
I treated by taking probiotics and eating a lot of yogurt.
Right.
I mean, which sounds crazy. This is not medical advice. Now, sporadically, I would have to take an antibiotic, but it was a very specific antibiotic, not something that is just completely wiping out your bacterial system, like a Z-Pak, which, definitely we need those sometimes. But there's certain things that are just completely depleting you, and especially if you've had to take it for a couple of times. Right. And I wasn't on an antibiotic for an extraordinary length of time by any means. I think I had taken antibiotics 3 times in a year. So this is not unheard of for a lot of people.
Right.
But I think a lot of people don't know. I mean, 1 round of antibiotics can cause an imbalance if you are not aware of, how do I replenish this?
Right.
I mean, things like sourdough bread, that's a huge one.
Right.
There's, other fermented foods.
Also, just to remind you, if you've got some of these things going on, you do need to do your research. You do need to talk to a doctor or a functional, medicine doctor or a registered dietitian and have some of those tests done so you really know what's going on.
Right.
Because a lot of these things can be improved significantly. And so really knowing, what is this thing doing to my gut? I mean, we've talked before on this podcast.
Right.
Is this a podcast?
Yeah, we can say podcast.
This visual podcast.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've talked before about the importance of experimenting for yourself. If I eat this thing regularly, or if I don't eat this thing regularly,
how do I feel?
Because, we a lot of times I think we give our power over to the medical community.
Right.
And we discount our own experiences.
Right.
But we have power in we have knowledge from our own experiences of how our body feels, because you can't take an x-ray and say, well, your gut, looks horrible and you should feel horrible, but you're feeling great, or vice versa.
Right. It's such an ambiguous scenario. And even doing baseline testing, like you're saying, it's the importance of seeing a nutritionist or a dietitian or a functional medicine practitioner, because I could go in, or you could go in, and just a baseline, lab test, well, you're fine. So just,
Right.
But that isn't necessarily indicative of the things that are happening. So definitely being an advocate for yourself and your health when you know that something is off. And I was very fortunate in my situation that someone had, recommended me seeing this specialist who was located out of New Jersey, or I would have been on a completely different life path.
Right.
It was a devastating situation.
Yeah. Well, and I think all of that is important too, of why coaching can be so helpful, right? So I had some coaching during this time. This is one of the areas that you like to coach people around a lot, right? So if you're saying, okay, I'm going to experiment with putting this in my diet or taking this out of my diet, and then track how I feel, you have another person who can see patterns, right? If you're tracking that data somehow on paper, right, or you're graphing it or whatever.
Right, you're using a fitness tracker.
Yes, you have someone who can help you see patterns, who you might not be able to see it because you don't know it yourself, but you have someone who does a lot of education and training in this area, who can see things from a distance, and help you realize oh, actually, seems like this is making you feel a lot better. Is this something you want to continue?
Right. Or I've noticed your energy is really low when you made this change in your diet. You've started eating let's say a higher protein diet, and that just maybe isn't something that's working for you. Your carb intake, I know low carb everything. Well, that's like definitely not the move for a lot of people. But you're not giving yourself enough carbs to maintain a healthy energy level. I mean, I've been there. I've done that myself.
So, okay, can you say a little bit more about the whole idea of healthy bacteria in the gut? Because I think when people first hear the word bacteria, they automatically think, ooh, bacteria is bad.
Right. Healthy bacteria or good bacteria versus bad bacteria. I mean, we need good bacteria in our body. I'm trying to think of it's so hard to describe. I mean, bad bacteria is...
I think of like good bacteria as like they're your firefighters,
right? They're like
and your police officers.
They're like your superheroes.
They're your superheroes, and
then bad bacteria is coming in, and it is just completely absorbing everything and just wiping out everything, and just definitely breaking down your immune system, any healthy barriers. I mean, it's
like the leaky gut. Like they're breaking down the healthy barriers within the cell wall,
which you need those bacteria to kind of protect, and then the bad bacteria are just coming in and letting. It's almost like I feel like it's like a feeding frenzy or like a parasitic situation.
Right.
Yeah, that's how I visualize it.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are some, and I know you're not giving specific like medical advice or dietary advice, but if people are interested in like figuring out what are some things that are bring us good bacteria.
Right.
What are some types of things that people should research and we'll talk to their providers about?
Yes, I think having, yogurt, and I'm not talking about like Yoplait,
Okay, what kind of yogurt are you talking about?
I'm talking about like Greek yogurt, something that has, live active cultures in it like that. That's huge. I mean, that's paramount. And having, healthy probiotics and prebiotics. Of course, there's supplements, but ideally, you're trying to get a lot of these from actual food sources versus supplementation because, different people absorb things differently based on your bacterial system. I mean, if your bacterial system is thrown off, I mean, you could be taking and doing, all of the right things, but your body is not able to synthesize those, vitamins and minerals that you need. So I think it's just kind of definitely keeping track. I think doing some kind of fitness tracker, not in anything, crazy or extreme, but like
keeping track of the food you're eating.
Yes, keeping track of the food that you're eating and how you're feeling, and then how your gut system is functioning, your digestive system, not getting into like anything too specific, but I mean, it's pretty
go look up what should your bowels look like, your bowel movements look
like the frequency, or because it's something that we don't really talk about a lot. I mean, I definitely don't. It's not a thing that I'm just like, hey, but it is something that is really important to monitor. And having irregularities, irritable bowels, I mean, that is not something that is
diverticulitis, Crohn's
indicative
disease, all that kind of
of
stuff.
a healthy bacterial system.
Right.
And I mean, I personally, I had gotten out of the habit of, doing some of the things that I know help my body the best, and immediately, bloating, constipation. I mean, it affects my my moods. I mean, literally everything. So it, to me, is something that everyone should, kind of get on board with.
Can we go back to the foods? So,
yes,
like when you're talking about foods with good bacteria, you said yogurt, but then there's also like fermented foods, which honestly the first thing, like I'm like, ugh, that doesn't sound very good,
yeah, I think a lot of fermented foods are not, for everybody.
What are fermented foods for people who don't know?
Think of something like kimchi. I mean, a lot of people
don't even know what kimchi is.
Okay, some people do know what kimchi is.
Some people do.
Right. Like what is kimchi? It is a Korean like cabbage situation. I don't know if I'm doing
like a vinegar cabbage.
Yes, and if someone that I am dear friends with sees this and sees that I cannot describe kimchi, we might not be friends anymore. Yeah. So, anyways, it is something amazing, and it is tremendous for your health. But then other things like having sourdough bread.
Like,
that is
like fermented carrots.
Yeah.
And like cauliflower. Olives. Are olives? Does this count?
I feel like certain olives do count.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like maybe some of the stronger ones.
Yeah,
like,
some
that
of
are
the
not
stronger
cans, that are more like
not like
fermented.
the black onesie olives that we're probably getting for like different
I love
salads.
black onesie olives.
Same.
That's a good snack. But probably not good for fermented. That doesn't count for fermented.
Yeah, but I think just starting out with the basics, like maybe you're not a huge fan of yogurt, but like throw some fun toppings in there.
Right, or like put some honey in there, or things like that.
fresh fruit. I mean,
Fresh fruit,
you know, if
yeah.
it's a texture issue,
Yeah.
I think there's some things like that are a good like baseline before you're jumping into some of those
Also,
other foods.
like,
Like I'm not.
as you're changing your diet and your gut health is improving, I think you start to crave those things a little bit, and your taste buds actually change, and it's, you know, it's just your body's has to adjust to that.
Right. It's not an immediate.
It's not an immediate thing. It's just like everything we've talked about. Like anytime you're making a behavioral change, you have to, well, you don't have to, but generally speaking, you know, work up slow, but be consistent, because it's the consistency with anything that matters. Your hydration, your exercise, your sleep, your working on your gut health, you know. But I think after a while, like when you start feeling better from the changes in your diet, you don't want to go back, and it's pretty obvious when you have eaten something that your gut is like,
oh my gosh,
100%. I don't like that.
I mean, stuff that I would never have thought did not affect me before. Like sometimes things that are really heavily seasoned with like MSG before, never an issue. Now, I mean, you're
more sensitive to it.
Oh my gosh! Like, am I 9 months pregnant all of a sudden? I mean, it is Yeah, no, it's you gotta like as we get older. I mean, you know, typically teenagers. I have one that is very interested in these things, but I mean, you know, no one's like, you know, monitoring or like really like, oh, this is so important. But as we get older, it is. I mean, the most minimal things that can drastically affect things in our health. I mean, the pendulum is huge. But
I think also with our teens and our younger kids, it's also really important to talk about, you know, healthy foods and oh my gosh, it's so hard, I think, because there's just sugar everywhere. And
oh my gosh, processed okay, and that's everywhere. That brings up a great point. Processed foods are huge. Oh my gosh. I mean, huge as far as depleting.
But I talked, you know, and then I talk to my kids about like, well, how does it make you feel? So if I'm trying to get them to eat better, or like, you know, say no a little bit more often to like the tons of candy that comes their way at school or whatever, you know, just how does it make you feel?
It's not a like, what is the calories? What is your weight? What is your
this
clothing
food is
size?
good or this food is bad.
No. There's no bad foods.
Because there's going to be some healthy foods that actually make you feel pretty crappy.
Like I mean, really.
Like if you have lactose intolerance, that's not going to feel good, even though it's a healthy food, maybe whatever. So again, I think a lot of the stuff is like teaching yourself and teaching your, you know, anybody who's in your life about listening to your body. What is your body telling you? Because your body is communicating to you all the time.
And it is, I think a lot of times, you know, kids specifically, like you said, I mean, they're on their phones all the time, or they're sitting in front of the TV, or they're, you know, doing 8,000 other things. And it's really easy for anyone, adults included, to miss those cues of
because we're not paying attention.
Because we're not. And I think, you know, this will be a topic for another day, but kind of like goes to like intuitive eating.
Yes, intuitive eating. That's going to be another good topic. But when I did my food coaching, that was a question that was asked of me a lot. And I'm sure that's a question you ask when you do coaching. Is, okay, let's think about how you have felt physically and emotionally and mentally. And, you know, if someone didn't ask me that question, I probably wouldn't think about it very often. And so then I wouldn't pair it with, well, actually, I did really well this week with not eating gluten. And I have felt significantly better. And, you know, so whatever it is for you, I think that's if you have a coach who can help you, unless you can do it yourself, but which ask that question and help you figure out those connections is really good.
You know, separate. It's kind of a lot of times the emotional eating versus, oh, that makes me feel good. Well, is it making you feel physically good? Or is it making you feel it's fulfilling something that you need at the time?
I mean, we could go on and on, because now I'm just thinking, I got to say it real quick before I forget. But how sometimes something that we eat and it's affecting our gut health, we might not actually feel the effects of it for a day or two.
Oh my gosh.
Which is another really difficult.
Yeah, because how do you recognize, like, okay, well, this is what I ate today and I feel like a trash can versus I felt fine yesterday.
So that's another reason, like when you are working with somebody, you know, helping them keep some kind of record. Again, it doesn't have to be like super.
It's like, doesn't have to be like an excessive.
It doesn't have to be overwhelming.
But
again, like when you have someone who can look at your food log and combine it with, this is how I feel, they're going to see things that you can't see.
Right. I mean, right. I could not, every person, like, we say this, of course, every therapist, every coach needs a coach. Every therapist needs a therapist.
Absolutely.
If we could all do these things on our own, the society as a whole would be like completely different.
Right.
Like, so, it's having someone who is, coming from a neutral perspective.
And from a further away perspective.
From a macro, I feel like I say this every time, but it's just a macro perspective of taking a step back and looking at things as a whole versus things like you said, oh, well, I ate this yesterday. I was fine.
Right.
And then,
Right.
Yeah. That's true.
Anything else you want to say about gut health? Oh, we could go on.
No, I know. I think
we actually did. We had a whole conversation about gut health before we recorded this, and we thought we should have recorded this.
We should have been recording this.
So now you get the little mini version.
Yeah, you get the tiny tidbits.
Yeah. So all right, this is good. Also, if you haven't been drinking your water, get your water.
Look at this.
We did a whole thing about hydration.
Yes.
And so drink your water.
Yeah.
See y'all next time. Have a good week.
Take care. Let us know if you have any topics that you want us to cover over the next
or if you want us to go over something again.
Right.
Other questions.
And a little further depth.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.